Hi everyone, it's a new year, it's a whole new season of 24-bit. Welcome once again to the 24-bit podcast, and we are starting the year off with where I personally started the year. I shared something about my number one recommendation from the past year about if you're in the market for a laptop and your spend is somewhere in the high leagues, at least in the context of the local laptop market. Remember in the previous season last year we did talk about laptops. We explored the used laptop segment in Kenya, which is quite popular with students and everyone else in the market for a laptop. But then there are those other people whom their needs and demands require a little more oomph, a little more power, and they have quite the money to spend. Over the last 2 years, that is since mid 2020, we've had an option in the global market, that is the MacBook Air from Apple, which was updated to come with Apple's new Apple Silicon chipset, that is the M1. We've since moved to newer versions of the M1, but the M1 MacBook Air is still the only laptop that Apple offers. And for the past year, that has been my number one recommendation to most people. Reason being, for most times you can get it on a deal of $899, and its recommended retail pricing for the base model is $999. My opinion, at its pricing, there's barely anything that can beat it. So I shared that, and there was quite a lot of reactions, at least on Twitter. Some agreeing, some disagreeing strongly, some raising their various use cases, and some totally not understanding why. So on the first episode of 24-bit in 2022, and also in our 5th season now, incredible to think that we've been doing this for 5 years now. We're going to discuss this rather quote-unquote controversial topic, and with me are the usual suspects.
Dixon Atieno, techish.com.
And I'm Nick Canali from techtrends.ke.
Yeah, they're here to help me convince you that if you have a significant amount of money and maybe running into the early six figures, something from from the Apple Silicon Fall is something you should consider. Or maybe if they have of a contrary opinion, to sell me on what other options are out there and all these things. Interesting bit is you might not be seeing us, but we're all actually using devices with Apple Silicon. Dixon has an M1 MacBook Pro, I have an M1 MacBook Air, and Nixon does have an M1 MacBook Air. So we do have quite some experience using these devices. So that is what we are working with, and that's where we are starting with. First of all, if you have to understand what the M1 MacBooks are, Dixon, can you help us understand what these devices are? Because from the responses I got online, a lot of people have been judging the M1 MacBook Air from their past experience with previous Apple MacBooks, which include the previous Intel range. Yes.
So I happen to be lucky enough to have used the last 13-inch MacBook Pro from 2020. Before I got the M1 MacBook Air. You remember they launched one in March, and then they launched the MacBook Air at the end of the year. So the Intel one comes with the exact same build, and this one, like this one, but the difference is the internal. So the M1 is based on a different architecture. So Windows uses the Intel x86 architecture, the Intel, not Windows.
Intel chipsets.
The Intel chipsets use the x86 architecture. It is very good in terms of processing power, but it uses a lot of, it requires a lot of energy. Apple, on the other hand, have been trying to build their own ecosystem where they control everything from hardware to software. The problem has been that their hardware, in terms of the processor, was never good enough to power their laptops. But over the years, you've seen them build the bionic chips that they use on their iPhones. So they got to a level where the 5 nanometer process from TSMC was good enough to build a system on chip processor that can handle all the tasks and handle them quite well. So the major difference is the architecture, but that change in architecture ensures that not only is your processing fast, you also get really good battery life. So the difference is in architecture.
Okay.
And how important is the architecture now? This is if you are really interested in knowing how important the architecture is, at least how it has been, because the Intel x86 architecture is older than all of us in the room.
Yes.
It's over 40 years old currently.
Yes.
Why that is important is because of how computers basically communicate. When you are typing on your keyboard, when you're interacting with a touch screen, you are issuing instructions. Those instructions have to be carried over to the processor. People who've done some bit about computing told you about buses and registers and those kinds of things. So the architecture takes care of that. So that determines how speedy they are,
how fast your machine is,
and in the process energy is used. So how the battery drain kind of is. Now Apple has had like over decades a head start in the mobile space with the iPhone, and their mobile processors on the iPhone, the A series, and also the iPads are really the best in the industry. The fastest, all of those things.
Best in energy consumption, best
all
in
those
performance.
Things. And since also Apple has been making MacBooks all along, I think they've been looking at ways of bringing that same experience. Even though for the longest time iPhones haven't had the best battery life, but they've been looking to bring an end-to-end experience, which is Apple's for the lack of better word, Apple is like a control freak. They've been wanting to have better protection of their walled garden, to give their users end-to-end experience, better integration between the hardware and the software. And they're only able to do that if they're able to have proper control of the most important component in a computer. That's the chipset. And from what you've explained, that's how we got with the Apple Silicon.
So the Apple M1 is based on the ARM architecture. ARM architecture means not only that most of the components are closely knit together, so communication is much easier. The RAM is on board, and the processor and other things that they would want to control. For example, before the ARM before the move to M1, Apple had introduced a new chipset to Intel Macs, the T1 for security. They had that one to handle their security. They had another chipset to handle AI or something of that sort. I don't remember.
There was.
So with the M1, everything is built onto one chipset. It's a system on chip. I don't know how to explain it easily. I wish there were diagrams. So you can build on the cores. So there are performance cores, there are energy efficient cores, and there are the normal cores. So when you are pulling like a heavy task, the performance cores will take over. If you're pulling something very normal, the normal cores will be working. So at the end of the day, for the same amount of battery, for the same size of battery, you will get longer battery life on an ARM chipset compared to an x86. So that's why, compared to my 2020 Intel Core i5 Mac and the M1 MacBook Pro, both are MacBook Pros, but I was particularly shocked to be getting close to a week of use on the MacBook Pro on normal typing and browsing, and that's something I couldn't get on the Intel Mac. The other difference is the heating. So the Intel, with its demand for power, requires cooling because it's using a lot of energy at once. With the M1, you don't require as much cooling. That's why the MacBook Airs that you're using are fanless. That's why phones are fanless. But on a MacBook Pro, since you'll be expected to demand more power and there's an extra core for energy, there's a fan, which has never come on unless I'm exporting a video.
And actually, if someone wants to buy the M1 right now, it's actually a good time to do it because the price has fallen down to like $8.99 on Amazon right now.
Yes. And then the other thing about the M1 is, I remember attending the launch of the Huawei Mate 9, and that was the first time that Huawei, if I remember correctly, was introducing something we were calling the NPU.
The neural processing unit.
Neural processing unit. Most of us are used to the CPU and the GPU, so the central processing unit and the graphics processing unit. Nowadays, we also have the NPU. For those that follow, one of the most famous NPUs out there is on the Pixels, the Tensor.
The Tensor.
Now, the M1s come with all those capabilities, integrated the way you've explained, which in a nutshell is what makes all this magic that we've been talking about happen. Now, for those listening, if you're following along and you haven't dropped off somewhere, That is the difference between the previous MacBooks, probably most of the MacBooks that you can encounter in the Kenyan market right now in use by DJs, by various other pros, and everywhere.
and these ones.
Yeah,
That
that's what they don't have. That's what now. That's what the M1 MacBooks have that we are here to talk about. Those are the things that normally you won't see in a marketing template.
Yes.
But that's what they are about. Those are the technical aspects that have been handled a bit differently and which bring about all these other advantages that I've been waxing lyrical about.
Yes. And that's the main thing that people should notice, that we used to talk about Intel i5, Intel i7, Intel i3 on many laptops. Apple has moved from that. So they'll be releasing new generations of their own silicon. The way the iPhone came with the A12, A13, A14.
Okay.
So the difference will be in the processing cores, the energy cores on the, how are they called? High efficiency cores.
Yes.
On the chipset. So it will be the same architecture, just with more cores. So for example, when the M1 came, it had 8, I think it's about 8 and 6 cores difference. 7 cores for the Air and around 8.
Actually, now that's an interesting thing to bring up, because over time, since the launch of the M1 chipset in 2020
November.
Apple has been like the clear leader in that field.
Yes.
And recently at CES, just this month when it was starting, Intel launched. What did they launch? There's the new Intel chipset. It's the 12th gen. It's Alder Lake.
It's 12th gen, yeah.
I don't know the name. It's Lex.
should be the Alder Lake. We got to see a demo. They were launched actually end of last year, and we got to see what they are capable of with demo machines at CES. And those ones, at least according to Intel, since we had to see them in real life, those ones are the ones supposed to take on the M1. Here is an interesting technology that's being applied. The architecture being applied in those is an architecture that we've been seeing on mobile devices, looking to do what the M1 is doing by having what did you call them?
High efficiency and low performance cores.
So that when you are doing something that is demanding, the computer uses the high efficiency cores. When it's not, like you're using a word processor, for instance, it's using the low efficiency cores. That way, your computer is not constantly on high power mode and consuming unnecessary energy. The architecture is called big dot little. Now Intel is using that for its Alder Lake. We've been using that on our phones because our phones can't be on high
efficiency all the time.
Yes. But you're having 4 cores, so you'll find you have 4 cores, but at any given time, there's only just a number that are on to assist you, and then when you need all the power, that's why we have all these modes in our phones, like a gaming mode and everything. You'll find it gets to
switch on the the performance cores.
Yes.
What I was trying to explain was the fact that kitambo, you look at Intel i5 or i7 to gauge power. Right now, whichever name Apple has come up with, M1 Pro, M1 Max, M1, but the thing that you look at mostly is the number of cores. So for example, the M1 came with 8 cores consisting of 4 performance, high performance, and 4 high efficiency. The new M1 Pro is a 10 core, and it comes with 8 high performance and 2 high efficiency. And it's way better. So I think what we'll be looking at with, if more people come into the ARM architecture, Samsung is promising something of the sort, is that you'll be looking at the number of cores that the processor comes with.
And I think for a long time, Apple has been accused of basically just, on all its products, just focusing on aesthetics. But I think with the M1, like, of course, the design doesn't look so much different from the previous Macs. But you know what they're doing with the internals and all that?
Yeah.
I wrote an article about that. I was saying this design haikukuwa ina work for the Intel chipsets. It wasn't.
You remember that
Core i9
that
heat mpaka watu wanaweka kwa fridge.
Exactly. That's where we are coming from.
Yes, but with this design, the laptop is always cool.
Yeah.
It's now a laptop.
Yeah,
Because
finally.
kitambo ilikuwa
It
You
was,
can
it,
easily
it
use
was,
it
it
on
was,
your
it was a
laptop
portable
without-
banner.
Affordable banner.
Yes. And I hope Apple sticks with this design for a while. Like, nimependa the new 14 na 16 inch, but they're very
Mimi
expensive.
sijapenda hizo stories za notch.
They're very
Where-
expensive.
where-
yes,
where there are
apart from
notches.
the notch.
Yeah.
But they're very expensive and they're not like. I guess what I'm trying to say is the M1 is just good for performance. Hawafai kuchange the design. It can handle your video tasks kama ni small ones. It can handle your all day activity. Yeah.
Now,
But again,
all those thoughts, because now that we understand what the M1 Macs are, how they came to be, what the architecture, all that techie stuff is, at least to some of the people who are listening now that, and I hope we're on the same page. You guys have been using M1 machines for months on months, for Dixon for over a year.
Yeah.
Now, what has your user experience been? Because at the most bit, we've seen this time and again, people promise heaven, especially these things that we cover, phones. Everyone, when they're releasing something, they'll tell you this is faster, better, bigger, lighter, smarter.
Yeah.
I'm running out of adjectives here. But what has your experience been? Now, are all those technicalities? Because theoretically, that is what Apple promised, and also that's what I've been working with as a user. What has your experience been? Your workflow. I don't know much about your workflow, but I can figure out. For instance, you'll edit this podcast. That's the audio.
Yes.
If you are shooting a video, you'd also edit the video. You also have your own videos. You also need to do your own scripts, your own creative work. Hizo vitu zote. How has your M1 MacBook Pro served you? And how will that relate to somebody else looking to get one?
I think the biggest thing I should start with is battery.
Yeah.
I was really honestly, wakati unatumia an Intel Mac, you will think you are having like a very good experience because the promised 10 hours you're getting around 7 or 8. But here the promised 20 hours you're getting over that in some scenarios. The very first week I got it, I was one of the early adopters. Even ndio tulikuwa tunaitwa like nyinyi ndio guinea pigs. You're going to test something that's not tested, sindio? The first thing is the move from x86 to ARM means the programs will not run as efficiently. That was the fear of very many people. Kuna vitu venye havita run because the developers need to rework on the app so that it supports the new architecture. The good thing is Apple dealt with that, as we'll talk about. In terms of editing, I use Final Cut, so very easy. It is very nice. I swear to you, the only time the fan came on, I was exporting a 4K for around 16 minutes. It came on at the end, and it wasn't even on for a long time. It was just kidogo, then went silent. So I've never felt the fans of this laptop as per se, and that's why if you watch even YouTube reviewers, they'll tell you the M1 Air can export your videos very well. Other programs, I use Safari, I use Chrome, I use Microsoft Edge. Chrome squeezy, very little. Microsoft Edge and Safari mostly. So I think Microsoft Edge was among the first third-party browsers to update to support the M1. It works really well, doesn't drain battery. I use Word for typing and all that. I use GarageBand for some audio editing and voice notes and all that. What other apps do I use? I think everything that I use works. Yes. Everything that I wanted to use really works. And there is more. With the M1 chipset, you can install iPad and iPhone apps on your laptop. And some of I've
seen those recommended to me on the App Store.
On the App Store, yes. Some companies in Kenya already support that. For example, the Tcash app runs on the M1.
Oh, nice. It's the Telecom Kenya's one.
Yes. You can sideload if you want to go that route, though it is quite tedious because, of course, Apple want to close some of those. But once you sideload, you can run some certain iPhone and iPad apps on the M1, which is not very important because Apple already has a lot of apps on the App Store. Yes. VLC runs well. BitTorrent, if you're people who do that, it runs well. WhatsApp for Mac runs well, and now they support independent use, so you don't have to have your phone always connected. Your WhatsApp just runs like a Telegram client. You don't have to have your phone connected. Spotify, and Apple Music and
And-
support. Yes.
And it's basically the same experience I'm getting. Remember me telling you, I think one of the best investments I ever made actually was buying this particular laptop. Yeah, and being a person who was moving from a Windows laptop to I mean, there's no way. For example, I mean, I've been using Windows laptops for the longest time now, and none has ever, taken me for 20 hours. The battery's never taken me for 20 hours or even more.
stress.
And to think that you're
Na
going to buy a
hauna-
funny
Exactly.
laptop.
Yeah. Na hakuna something that is really before I went to my first Mac, my previous laptop was the HP Spectra.
Oh yeah.
Windows have really good designs. You know how the Spectra looks like. Yeah. Very
Yeah, that thing
thin,
look
very
nice
light,
too. Yeah.
very awesome. But kitu yenye is always there in the back of your mind is battery life.
Yeah.
You carry a charger
You
everywhere.
cannot like be, will it last me the whole day? I carried my M1 laptop 2020 and 2021 home, December. I don't carry the charger because I'm going home to relax. If anything comes up, I boot it, type, work, edit whatever it's to be edited, and send. I don't sitakuja kuangalia battery life iko ngapi because it's not something that pops up in your mind. Yeah. It's if you've used an iPad, you know how good
Yeah,
the
yeah.
battery life on an iPad is.
Yeah.
So this is just a more powerful iPad, I could say.
And it's the same thing actually. I remember even telling you when during the holidays I went home and I forgot to carry the charger. And for that 2 weeks and a half I was there, of course opening the laptop once just in a week. Like I came back, I was still at 30%.
And you have an M1 Air, which
Yeah,
you just plug in a phone charger, charges it.
Yeah. Also speaking from an M1 Air, I have the M1 Air and I'm still keeping my old. Is it old? Because it's a 2020 machine. The MacBook Pro Intel. That one has the fans, just like yours. The difference being yours is the M1.
Yes.
Our Airs don't have any fans, and interesting bit is there's nothing I have thrown at it
That it can't handle.
that it can't handle. So my comments are, and my question is, does that mean this is something you can recommend to pretty much anyone out there?
Honestly, if you're doing and people, I don't know why people wanapenda kuargue bila kujaribu. If you're doing simple video editing,
Yeah.
just a few minutes of YouTube and maybe 1080 or 4K, just simple 4K. Hata kama ni 4K na ume export as this efficient, what is it called? It's coming with the new fonts, the efficient standard 4K recording.
Oh, HEVC.
Yes.
Yeah.
It works really well on the on editing. You
HEVC
don't-
ilikuwa ikilemea sana hizi machines zingine tulikuwa nazo.
Yes, you are editing and you don't feel like it's tasking in any way. My HP Spectra would inge wine. Just put a 4K video on the timeline and the fans will come on, it will get very hot. My Intel Mac the same. This one handles editing very well. This one handles I love the keyboard because they switched back to the normal keyboard. Uliacha ujinga ya butterfly switches. So if you're doing all these simple tasks and you're willing to spend just shy of 90,000, because if you're buying a Windows laptop to edit, you will need more. You're going to get more value on this than on a Windows machine of the same amount, I will say.
That at least has been my argument, but as I came to learn from the arguments being fronted by people, yeah, there are so many other arguments. At least from where I see it, I didn't see substance for most of them, because the only things I'd entertain the thoughts are that for the longest time, Mac OS, now we are moving away from the hardware. We're talking about the software that runs on this hardware. Mac OS by itself has had a challenge attracting universal developers for now niche things. So you're an architect, you're a surveyor, you're an engineer, those kinds of things. You'd find for the most time whatever you use for the industry standards in Kenya and much of the Commonwealth, there might be no equivalence on the Mac or even cloud solutions that you can turn to. Now those are niche use cases and you'll need to find what works for.
What works best
Those are
for
some of the arguments I encountered. The other one is
But the thing
we are
before-
hashtag we are
the thing
gamers.
is,
Yeah.
our niche people, whatever works best for them will work better than here.
Yes,
That's
yes,
agreed.
yes.
And they don't need the features that work best here, so they can
Yes.
just move to whatever works best for them.
Yes. The other people are hashtag we are gamers. And there I am. For the life of me, I don't know anyone who buys a MacBook to game.
To get no one.
Yeah.
I guess if they want to support it, they can now because the processor is that powerful.
Yeah.
But not yet.
And I've seen I've seen I think all the games that I enjoy on the iPad are also available for
on the
my
Mac,
M1
yes.
Air. But I'm not interested. The reason I keep both the iPad Pro and this one is because I have almost different use cases for it. I know in a past episode, that was 2020, we said for most people an iPad Pro would serve them well. But for us who have hangovers from a bygone era,
Yes,
we do prefer our machines in this clamshell format and all of that. I'm at home with my MacBook Air. It's a good advantage that it's as powerful and has this long endurance rating and all, but I actually prefer this kind of setup. And for most people, I think that should really work, because for the longest time, the argument against getting a MacBook, at least in Kenya, has been the price. These things are bloody pricey.
Yeah.
And in Kenya, they're even more expensive.
Yeah, and
But look at
even
the
more
M1.
expensive.
Of course, like one more than 100K looks pricey. But again, it's not overpriced based on what you're getting.
No, it's not.
It's
not.
not.
Compare
Because for the
compare
first time,
Windows of the same year or of processor, you'll get it at a higher price, because what people are buying in Kenya are refurb Windows laptops with running older generation processors at high prices.
Yeah.
So someone argues with you about the M1 and they're getting
bootleg software.
a 9th gen or an 8th gen for very high prices. Yeah.
For the first time, this is what makes this laptop a top recommendation from me. For the first time, we have a MacBook that can compete with those Windows machines. Because because if you are like, I remember the time you are buying a Spectre, there wasn't much. In fact, you are looking for a Mi notebook.
I
right?
was looking for a Dell XPS 13 and the Xiaomi Mi notebook.
Exactly.
Yes.
There wasn't much in the way of options in the market. Now I looked at Dell's website. Now, assuming you are here in Kenya and you're able to play the apples to apples comparison, for the lack of using other distinguishing terms, for $999, what Dell gives you cannot
compare to the M1.
To the M1, and it's in the XPS
Air, not
lineup.
the Pro, just the Air. Yes,
exactly, just the Air. So whatever other option you pick, you're going to spend more. Something that can't compete, one, on performance, and two, on endurance. So that battery life. And let's not get started on the design. These things look good.
Yes.
And those
on
are
design,
things,
I can argue. Because the XPS looks really good on design.
Looks
on
good,
design,
but
ones are the bezels. Keyboard. I love it's tinier.
Yes.
I'm going with the
But other than the XPS, what else would you pick for $999 that competes with the design of the MacBook Air? What I'm looking at here, what I'm looking at here is this build quality, where if you drop this thing, chances of it surviving are very high compared to some plastic stuff that you can find elsewhere. And then there's a big pet peeve of mine, which is why when I'm getting a Windows machine, at least that has been the case in the last 5 years, it has to be a Lenovo, the trackpad.
Oh yes,
this I think I'm backed by enough numbers. If you bother to check, this is the best in the business.
This is the best trackpad in the business.
So if an entry level laptop iko nayo,
my first switch, and these trackpads have existed for about 4 or 5 years on the Mac. I could not believe that I am touching a touchpad that is not moving. It's not mechanical. My hand feels like it's mechanical. When I click, I feel like it's clicking, but it's not moving. It's a vibration, and it's on a glass surface. And umeweka all the technology chini zenye requires diagrams to show, but works really well. I love that hata when I'm typing, accidental touches hakuna. And it's such a big trackpad, by the way. See, this is the trackpad size of an iPhone SE.
Yes.
And una type hapa hivi, no accidental touches. The gestures work, and they work really well.
Yes, 3 finger swipes.
Yes.
You get used to them.
Yes, you get used to the gestures. You get used to like the trackpad is really good. And I feel like I could say the Dell is trying, because I've watched reviews where the trackpad has gotten better on the Dell and the HP, but I haven't experienced that, so I can only talk of this.
One other argument I saw actually people talk about, actually when you posted that tweet, is about software updates, like how at times they keep up messing the entire So I don't know if these are isolated cases or
Nah,
Who messes up software between Windows and Macs?
That's really
Honestly.
not. That's really not a problem for Macs. And I think, and not I think, I have actually shared more than 3 times on this podcast why I ever bought my very first MacBook. I bought my very first MacBook was the 2017 MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
Bought it brand new. The reason I bought it was actually same month. That year in 2018, same month. The reason I bought it is I woke up one morning and my Windows machine just collapsed and died on me when I was handling very critical work. There and then a decision was made that I needed the kind of reliability that a MacBook will offer me. That's when I bought my first MacBook. The experience has been the same ever since. Now I have a 2020. I have 2 2020 machines. The experience is the same. That kind of uniformity is not something anyone else can promise you. The laptop has never died on me. In between, though, since I've maintained another Windows machine that I do use for other tasks, and also because I'm so used to Windows anyway, I've gotten BSOD enough times. Now we have Windows 11.
Windows 11, I haven't tried it.
No, there's other than BSOD, there's now a newer color for that screen of death anyway.
Oh.
Yeah, but still, it's
still happening.
It's still there. Like, that's not an argument for Macs. Because, like, I remember the day Monterey came out.
yeah.
I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It rolled out to all of us universally.
But I jumped on the developer Nini very early, and I didn't experience any issues. I was still editing, I was still typing, and this is a test version. And what I love about Apple is that software update, it drops for the whole world. It is not like Samsung Android 12 itakuja huku.
Two main faces.
Yes. So when Apple says it's dropping on 23rd, all of us can download it on 23rd.
Yes.
And all of us will expect the same issues kama iko na issue. Ama the same experience kama hakuna issues. Yes.
I guess one thing maybe the comments Nick is pointing to we're failing to highlight or capture wrongly is the support for apps on Apple Silicon. So that's where Rosetta comes in. I think what has been your experience using apps that might not have been natively supported in one?
Experience yake imekuwa na shida yoyote. Uje tuambie experience yako.
But I haven't really there's not really nothing really bad to say about this laptop actually.
Hatuna any negative.
Everything works just fine. I use Final Cut. All my apps are here actually.
I hope Apple doesn't listen to where you got your Final Cut from.
Like everything was just perfectly by the way. Everything, nothing. Nimeenda na laptop how many times, and Chance was just talking about here how I was just telling you guys how I've dropped this laptop twice.
I don't know why.
I've dropped it twice actually, and the day
Please don't drop your MacBook twice.
it was just an accident. But again, look at it. Everything just works for me.
And the last people in the room.
Something I haven't touched on that I really like is, honestly, when D-Brand ilitokea, I don't know where it came out from. I really wanted a D-Brand screen on my HP Spectra. I think now they support it. But I really like that I can customize this laptop to look as weird as or as good as I want it to look. Kwanza Chenze sahi ameweka a very nice case on his M1 Air, and it looks really nice. I don't think very many other laptops wako na third parties jumping on such accessories.
Not quite. I'll use this term. The alternative laptops I've had during the time that I've also had my 3 MacBooks don't have any universal support for accessories yes. Really, because the one disadvantage, the one disadvantage you'd say about these Macs that we're using now, we are moving away from the M1 and just generally talking about Macs. At least the current generation of Macs has been the reduced number of ports, which Apple has since addressed. There are now newer Macs that came out last year,
and they have everything.
They have everything. Even though my personal recommendation is don't get them.
They're too expensive.
They are too expensive, and you don't
the same power.
You don't
need all that power.
Yeah, you don't need all that power. That's why I've been recommending the M1 MacBook Air, because if you are to move away from the M1 MacBook Air, you really need to be doing lots of things for you to rationalize. Getting the Pro, for instance, or if you're going all the way and getting all the other options, like the M1 Pro or the MacBook Pro with the M1 Max. All of those. For most of us, one,
don't
that
need
money is too much, and two, all that power is wasted.
Going to waste, yeah.
Yeah, the case for the M1 MacBook Air is that you can get that almost that level of performance on this tiny budget.
I wish this was a video nionyeshe watu I ran Geekbench test when I got the M1 Pro, M1 MacBook Pro, and I was getting better in terms of numbers. This one benchmarks higher than so many Intel processors. It was benchmarking to the level of this high-end computer that Apple was producing at that time, the desktop, the
yes. What the Mac Pro?
Yes.
Oh,
so you can imagine if you're already benchmarking at that level for.
I was actually reading something here that Apple claims the MacBook Air is 3 times faster than other laptops in its class, and faster than 98% of PC laptops sold in the past year. It also says the neural engine is 9 times faster than the one in the previous MacBook Air, and its SSD is up to twice as fast thanks to the M1 and the latest flash technology.
Yes, so this is Cinebench R23 that I ran back in December 2020. The M1 processor, it was rated at 3 gigahertz, was just above the Intel Xeon CPU X5650. It had 7,650, and the Intel Xeon CPU was benchmarking at 6,867. So performance, you're sure you can push so much stuff with an M1. Yes, the high efficiency cores are cool and all that, but you won't be needing that power. That's why Kenya Chenza anasema is true. If you're just doing normal computer work, if, for example, on your Windows laptop, 8 GB, 12 GB, 16 GB RAM is serving you well, you'll get the same or better performance from here. Even 32 GB, I can say.
Yeah.
You're talking about Rosetta before Nikukati.
Rosetta, what's your experience with for apps that haven't been optimized for M1?
I guess when I moved to the M1, most of the apps weren't ready. Sindio, VLC, Word, Office, all Office wasn't ready, bado. But over time, everything has been, most of the apps I use right now run natively on the M1 architecture. But what I really loved about Apple is immediately I installed an app that, the first time I installed an app that wasn't ready for the M1 architecture, I was told, Rosetta nini, accept. Once I accepted that, I have never seen Rosetta pop up anywhere on my Mac. I've never seen it say that, oh, this is not running on the right architecture. All I need to do is go to Activity Monitor and see. So once I'm on Activity Monitor, I can see under CPU, I can see the kind that's running. And right now, everything is running under Apple architecture. At that time, you could see something written Rosetta or something written, what was the word? There was a word there.
I've actually opened my own Activity Monitor, and the one thing that's not optimized for the Apple Silicon here is an app I used called Bandwidth Plus. It's what I use to just keep tabs on the kind of consumption my machine is using. And OneDrive, the OneDrive app.
What is the word it's using?
Intel. Yes.
That's so
yeah, only those two. So Bandwidth Plus
most
and
of the
OneDrive
apps right now run natively on them.
The rest of the apps, all of them,
Apple, yes.
But my question is, considering I think more app, Mac apps maybe are going to be running natively on Apple Silicon, maybe in the coming, will we really need Rosetta in the coming?
No, Rosetta is meant to be transitional. Apple said 2 years, and we're in the second year.
Yeah.
And most of the developers already jumped.
Yeah, it was transitional because much as Apple has brought on a new chipset, new hardware, and it had worked with a good number of developers to make sure, like in Adobe, as many of the apps that people use are available in the shortest time period, if not day one. In between, there are so many other things that we do use that the developers would need time to get on board. So the Rosetta was kind of like a bridge to optimize whatever is there for M1 as the developer works to bring something native for M1, which now allows those apps, when they're being used, the user to get the kind of advantages that this chipset brings in performance, in battery consumption, those kinds of things.
What I really
So it's like basically how they moved from the PPC to
yes because this was Rosetta 2, so when they were moving from their power whatever CPUs to Intel.
Into Intel. Yeah. Good discussion, and I'm happy we are there. Now, there's one other group besides gamers that was up in arms, developers. Now, pretty much I get to interact with some of these people on a nearly daily basis. A good number of them do have very nice Mac setups. A good number do keep their Windows machines, mostly because of the kind of environment they get to develop for in their various workplaces. But there's also Xcode for those who are into Apple stuff. That's the IDE you would use for all things
developing on Nini.
On that platform. If your programming language is Swift and those kinds of things, basically. So my takeaway from that entire discussion has been, you're a niche user, you probably know what you want, whatever you want, whatever you've been using should pretty much work for you. And hopefully in future Apple should be at a position where they can get to reach you and address you. But for every other person, if you are looking to spend money above a certain point, in my case it's 70K, because that's a lot of money already for most Kenyans. The money that they're spending on laptops, most Kenyans, 60K and below, you are covered. You're either getting a brand new machine that is overpriced because basic specs and features, but which will work for you, or you are getting
an old
refurb that is spec'd almost maxed out, but at a good price, and it will serve you 2-3 years, 4, maybe even 5, and you'll be fine. But if you're not going above that ceiling and going to spend more,
and actually you want something that works and is new, and
you deserve one of whatever is the best out there, and that is basically what
and I guess that's the argument people missed.
Yes.
We're not telling you at wachana na 40
especially if you're niche user, don't buy it because we say it's a good laptop for you to buy.
It should be, if you're willing to spend on a new thing that's really amazing and works really well, and hautaki kutumia a refurb ama nini, and you're willing to spend as much money as that Chenza report, you're better off with this one.
Because nothing close, nothing slightly above comes close to it. Really, the numbers out there. I'm not a fan of running benchmarks when I'm writing reviews, and obviously I don't review laptops on my blog, but if you are out there and the numbers make you wet, just go look them. You realize nothing else comes close. Maybe we'll see a lot of competition with Aldalek powered machines.
But I feel like Intel is just hype. Wacha tungoje tuone reviews.
My hopes are on what AMD is doing.
Yes.
Because you can still get a good refurb by the laptop out here if just angalia vizuri
One of the things that I think we will discuss in the future, and you can tell us if it's something you're interested in hearing more about, is that bit. Should we buy used machines in Kenya? I know we touched a bit on it when we're talking about laptops, but it's still something that matters to a lot of people, because most times our budgets are strained, especially when kids are joining college. And what wameambiwa lazima report na laptop. At that point, looking at least drawing from our own to little experiences, somebody's going for first year, they don't know the kind of roommates they have, the kind of classmates they have, schoolmates they have, the kind of environment in that school, and all these things. They might be better off getting a refurb, for instance, because most times tenda kuibiwa tu first thing, than spending a small fortune on a machine. When they figured out all the kinds of things they want, they can upscale, get something better. Kama jamaa ameenda kampo na amekuwa a proper gamer, I mean, all this all those things.
I feel like the market is expanding. Ukiingia TBC sahi, the number of laptops they have there is quite big. And I love that. I don't know if but we can mention, because this is not a sponsored thing. So ukiingia TBC, you'll find Asus, find HP, Lenovo, and you'll find different ones for gaming, different ones for typing, kama wewe ni mtu normal. So there are many options.
But I think one thing we also need to talk about is, I mean, you know how crazy the same ones are priced here? Because how much did you buy this laptop? Before buying this laptop, I remember going to, what are they called? Asking for the same laptop. Nilikuja nikakwambia umeniambia pesa ngapi?
Oh yeah, our
Like local distributors.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that's the thing we didn't start with. We should have mentioned that we are not talking telling you to go to Elite Digital.
Yeah.
Ama nikumbushe jina zao Apple sijui nini.
I salute.
No.
Yeah.
If you want to get these machines, I hope you stayed to listen to the end because watu wenye walianza huko mbele alafu wakasema it's an elitist podcast. Anyway, yes, if you want to get the laptops, it's best to get deals from Maju and get someone to import it for you. You can talk to at Ichanza, anajua hizo vitu sana.
Thank you guys for an interesting discussion. I think we've tried to cover as much as we can in the shortest time period about the M1 MacBooks, and at least the hope is that if you're listening to this, if for nothing else, we've really at least tried to add to your bank of knowledge regarding the M1 chips and the M1 MacBooks, and probably a better placed yourself to make a sober decision on what works for you, what you'd want, and not to fight me that I'm telling you to buy an M1 MacBook Air and maybe to recommend something better to someone else who may ask you. I've been your host, Chenze Emmanuel. I write things tech that are not MacBooks at 100kenya.com.
I'm Dixon Otieno, techish.com.
And I'm Nick Kanali from techtrends.ke. And actually, Dixon has so much content on the M1's blog, so you actually go out and check out techish.com.
Yes. Please remember to share our podcast and please subscribe, and see you next time.